So this was one hell of an episode, but I can promise you guys right now that things are going to get way crazier than this moving forward in the next couple of episodes. But this was still a great episode because we got a couple of answers like what happened to Sarah and the role that Father Khatri played in all of this. But even then, we still ended up with more questions as well, which is fine by me because I am enjoying the ride. But let's go ahead and get into the recap for episode 6 titled Book 74. So the episode starts off by showing us Boyd and Kenny as they bury who I would assume is Nathan, and in the background there's a voiceover where we can hear Father Khatri as he gives a damn good sermon about chaos and faith, and how from the moment we are born we are lost and faced with chaos, and how we must endure that chaos through faith to eventually discover our purpose. And I think what Father Khatri is saying here is that whether they are trapped in the real world or the town, there will be chaos regardless, and that until they find their purpose they will continue to suffer. Or who knows, maybe they'll suffer even more once they find their purpose, which shit, that would suck. But let's try to stay positive here. But also during Father Khatri's sermon, we see Jade snatching an antenna off one of the cars to gather supplies for the radio. Then we see Tabitha at home putting items away when she comes across a notebook, which we'll talk about here in a second. Then we cut to Julie, who's outside of the colony house staring at the graves that Victor dug in episode 4. And as she heads back inside the house, we see her stealing the bouquet of flowers that Kevin left outside earlier for his Monster Boo thing. And that's right, I did say Monster Boo thing because she is his, Monster Boo thing. And also, she didn't really steal the bouquet of flowers. I mean, she just took them because it's colony house and that's what they do there. They see nice shit and they just take it. It doesn't really matter who it belongs to. And at this point, we actually don't know who Kevin is yet, so we'll get to that later. But back at the church after Father Khatri's sermon, Tabitha walks in to return the notebook she found, which we actually find out is a Bible that he made from memory, which is basically some Book of Eli type shit. But then Tabitha finally brings up the big question, which is, are we dead? And Father Khatri responds with, would it matter? And I'm just thinking like, yeah, I mean, that shit would matter to me. But he goes on to explain that it wouldn't matter because knowing if they are dead or alive would not change their circumstances. They would still be trying to find a way home, and the only thing that would change is the home that they are looking for, which means they are basically, either trying to find those heavenly gates or just back to the outside world. And he also tells Tabitha that her vehicle crashed after she arrived, ensuring her that she is alive along with the rest of her family. So my question now to everyone in the comments who keeps saying that this is going to end the same way the show Lost did is, do you believe him? Or do you think this is just a deflection by the writers and they are still going to end the series the same way? Which personally seems very unlikely to me, but I've been waiting to talk about this, but I couldn't really say anything, so I'm very curious now to see how you guys feel now after seeing this. After Tabitha leaves, we see Father Khatri head to the basement of the church, where we find out he has Crazy Sarah held captive. Then we jump back to Boyd and Kenny as they discuss how Sarah went crazy. And then Boyd tells Kenny how he thinks he's right about how they are running out of room on the board, which was a chess reference that Kenny made back in episode 2 about things changing in the town. But in this scene, Boyd acknowledges the changes, and he tells Kenny that he's thinking about taking a talisman and going into the woods to try to find a way out, since he knows now that the talismans will work in other places like it did in the RV. But Kenny doesn't really agree with this idea because he thinks it's suicide. And I honestly can't be mad at Kenny for feeling this way since he's already lost his father, and he's also really close to Boyd, and he's trying to avoid the idea of losing someone else he cares about. Then we jump to the Matthews where we see Jim explaining to Tabitha how there's no wire inside the cord for the lamp, and how the rest of the house is the same way and has no wires, just empty cords. Then Jay just fucking barges in their house like the asshole he is and tells Jim that he needs help with the radio. Fucking Jade, man. So yeah, the wire thing. That's a strange one. See, shit like this makes me think aliens or some kind of government experiment like Wayward Pines, where it's just like a dummy environment where they abduct people and just drop them in here and use them as lab rats for these creatures. Because if it is aliens, I can see them trying to replicate a human environment but not getting things quite right, like, cords with no wires in them. So yeah, I'm starting to think that might be a decent theory to add to the list. Then we cut back to the church with Father Khatri and Sarah, where he reveals that there was not one copy of the Bible anywhere in town, which explains why he had to make one. But this was very strange that there wasn't a copy of the Bible anywhere. I mean, this really makes Father Khatri seem like more of an asset to them since he's the only one that's able to memorize and rewrite the Bible. Plus the episode is called Book 74, but we'll get more into that later. But Father Khatri reveals to Sarah that Nathan told him about the voices and that she could possibly redeem herself by cooperating. Then we cut back to Colony House where we see Julie and Fatima discussing the bouquet of flowers that Julie found earlier on the banister. But of course we get the story behind the flowers later, although I've already mentioned it earlier. Then we jump to Jade and Jim on the highway highway back at the SUV, stripping the vehicle for parts. Jim brings up a good point, which is they could have gotten parts off any vehicle back in town, but of course Jade wanted parts off the Audi since it's a more luxury vehicle than anything back in town. You know what, I'm not gonna lie, Jade is like my main comedic relief throughout this show. Then back in town we see Tabitha and Ethan arrive at the diner to put some things in storage from the house. Here's where we find out that this is where they store the belongings from people who used to live there. While Tabitha and Ethan explore the storage area, Tabitha stumbles across a bracelet she recognizes. Then we jump back to Jade and Jim, who are outside of town near a tall tree where they need to set up the antenna. But Jade starts acting like an asshole again and reveals to Jim that he just wanted him to come so he could climb the tree and set up the antenna, basically because Jade is pretty much afraid of heights. Then we jump to Boyd at the clinic with Christy asking for advice about how to better communicate and bond with Kenny. Then she tells him that Kenny needs a father right now, not a sheriff, which is something Boyd has been trying to improve on lately with his own son. Back at the church, Father Cautry tells Sarah that the Bible is comprised of 73 books, and he thinks that they might be living the book that's yet to be written, which is book 74, the title of this episode. But here is where he finally reveals to Sarah that he wants to use her to communicate with the voices to find out their purpose there, and I can't lie, I am quite curious to see where that goes. Back at the Matthews house, Tabitha and Ethan notice that one of the lamps in the house starts to flicker, and Tabitha tells Ethan that they are going to play a game called Where Does the Light Come From? Then she takes a big ass hammer and starts knocking holes in the wall, which isn't a bad idea, honestly. I mean, come on, put some pep in your step and let's try to figure this shit out. But back at the tall tree with Jade and Jim, Jade starts to hallucinate again while Jim is in the tree with the antenna. Jade starts to look up after blood starts dripping down on his head and he sees the mutilated bodies of Civil War soldiers hanging from the trees, along with that strange symbol again. Then one of the soldiers appear behind him and starts to let off shots on his goofy ass. Jade then takes off into the woods and starts tripping and falling and shit like most idiots in horror movies, but the soldier eventually catches up to him and starts to put his bayonet to good use by stabbing the hell out of Jade. Jade finally snaps out of it when Jim shows up, and of course Jim has no clue what the hell is going on. Now here's my disclaimer, because I'm not a historian, so anyone with more accurate knowledge of the Civil War, please feel free to comment down below. So the Civil War started over a few different things, like economic interest, the federal government controlling the states, but it's mostly known for being the war that abolished slavery in the South, or at least it was supposed to anyway, because Juneteenth happened. But in the Civil War, the two sides were the United States Army and the Confederate States Army. The United States Army was also known as the Union Army, and the Union Army had black troops that would get sold back into slavery if captured. They would also get tortured and sometimes hung. Now, from my understanding, the black troops in the Confederate Army weren't quite treated the same as the black troops in the Union Army, because once again, the Confederate Army was the Confederate States. But like I said, if I'm wrong, please correct me down below. Now, I'm not sure if all the soldiers in this scene are black, but what I think we're seeing in this scene is mutilated black soldiers hanging in the trees, and one that's clearly alive that chases Jade and tries to kill him. This could mean that this place is some sort of time capsule, trapping moments from the past. Or maybe these were soldiers who wandered into the portal years ago during the Civil War, and we're seeing history repeat itself, along with their ghost. I mean, I honestly have no idea. As always, please come with your theories down below, because this one is weird. But that's it for the history lesson. Now back to the recap. So over at the church, Sarah tells Father Cautry that the voices told her that they used to be just like her, meaning that they were also trapped there as well at some point, I assume. Sarah also mentions how she already knew the two cars were coming and how they told her people would start dying once they arrived. Now this is pretty much like the heads up that Victor received earlier on. Now it looks like other characters are starting to get the same vibe, but they're just getting it different ways. And here we go again with these damn two cars, man. So I mean, maybe it's like a glitch in the Matrix or something, and when two cars show up at the same time, just all hell breaks loose, which also could mean that it's probably the best time to try to escape this place, since something there might be broken now because this event occurs. I mean, at this point, I'm just throwing shit at the wall. But we cut back to Jim at the tall tree, where we find out that he also gets a little bit of static on the radio. Then we jump to the diner, where we see Jade back in town after he aborted the mission with Jim, and he's sitting at the diner drawing the symbol he keeps seeing. Mrs. Liu approaches him and she recognizes the symbol. Then she shows him someone else's illustration of the same symbol in a notebook in the storage area. Then we cut back to the church, where we see that Sarah's out of breath from scribbling shitty images on notebook paper. After showing Father Cautry, he seems like he can't believe his eyes, lies, and Sarah tells him that there's his proof. Then we jump to Boyd at the police station as he digs around for a baseball and some gloves. Then he heads over to see Kenny and invites him out to play catch, and he declines. But Boyd proceeds to tell Kenny that he's sick and he has Parkinson's. And of course Kenny jumps his ass up after that because "I'm sick and it's serious" works like 99% of the time on the persuasion scale. Back at the Matthews, we see Jim finally getting home and he's surprised by all the new renovations from Ethan and Tabitha. He also tells Tabitha about the static with the radio, and Tabitha tells him how the cords just travel straight down, which is actually pretty crazy because if you know anything about the way wires run in the ground, then you know that they usually run parallel to the surface. They don't just go straight down into the depths of hell. But then Tabitha also tells Jim about the bracelet she found earlier, which we actually find out was a bracelet that she made for him that he lost in the past. And after Jim is somewhat convinced, he proceeds to help Tabitha dig. Now, I don't know what the hell to say about this one, except maybe they've been there before. Shit, maybe their doppelgangers were there at some point and left the bracelet. Or maybe a stranger who found Jim's bracelet later ended up in the town as well. Who knows? Then we jump to Father Cautry out at his meditation spot surrounded by those stones, digging for something. Then he grabs a bag out of the hole and pulls out a bottle of alcohol, a bloody shirt, and a chocolate bar, where we eventually get to see that the shitty drawing from Sarah earlier actually matches the artwork on the chocolate bar that he buried when he first arrived in the town. So yeah, this definitely confirms that someone was watching Father Cautry. We also find out that not only did he have a drinking problem, but he also had a damn chocolate addiction, so he had to bury that damn chocolate away. Chocolate! Chocolate! Then we cut back to see Boyd and Kenny playing catch, and how Kenny is now okay with the idea of Boyd going into the woods to hopefully try to find a way out. Then the episode ends with showing us Kevin's boo thing, his monster boo thing to be exact. The one he's been cupcaking with every night while everyone's asleep, and she's been just dying to get inside to get a hold of him. Oh Kevin, you damn fool. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about this week. There's Jim's bracelet and how the hell did it get there. There's the symbol Jade keeps seeing along with those black Union soldiers he saw. Plus we get more context on the whole "are they dead" thing. We also find out about the power situation, but not much. And we have a better idea now about the plans that Father Cautry has for Sarah. But will the others in the town agree with this? Also, I just went ahead and gave you Kevin's name because I don't think they actually say it in this episode. You don't actually get his name until episode 7. But yeah, the crazy guy cupcaking with the monster outside, his name is Kevin. But there you guys have it. So if you enjoyed the content, you all know what to do, and thank you for watching.